so often, geopolitics delivers a twist or two so bizarre you wonder if it was scripted. India has long pursued its own course, balancing ties with Russia, competing with China, engaging with the United States of America, but without pledging loyalty to any single side. Strategic autonomy has been New Delhi's guiding star. And then Donald Trump slaps India with a 50% tariff wall. That's not just protectionism. That's like hiring a bodyguard who then decides to mug you on your way home. Now, at first glance, it looks like another trade spat. Tariffs, protests, an interesting polite handshake between Modi and Xi in Tianjin, where the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, is having a pivotal summit. But here's just one twist of many that should grab your attention if you're following especially the war in Ukraine. Because if Modi and Xi actually move closer, that dynamic alone could humiliate Russia's Putin in ways you might not have thought of. Because if India and China reset, that may well eclipse the Sino-Russo partnership in size, scope, and strategic weight. To understand more exactly why, stick around until the end of the video where I go into more detail about that. But the point is, appearances mislead. Because if you connect the dots, which countries are hit, when these moves come, and how rivals are suddenly shaking hands, becoming partners, you realize this isn't routine. It's a forced reset. Trump's move of tariffs has thrown an unnecessary grenade into the Indian-US partnership, and by extension shoved Asia's two historical rivals, India and China, into a room together. Beijing, for all its rivalry, suddenly looks less like the menace and more like the nearby, less volatile option. Washington, meanwhile, looks like the ally who has tripped over its own shoelaces. And given it's Trump, we know how much of a hard impact that can have. So in this video, we're going to peel back those layers and trace how tariffs, supply chains, border tensions, tech flows, and the Russo-Ukrainian war are colliding. Because this isn't just about one summit photo or a few conversations. It's about how Trump's tariffs are forcing a recalibration across Asia, a reduction even more and humiliation for Putin, and how all that could quietly alter the global balance of power.
This is the Global Gambit.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, where this time, where we're touching upon the Russo-Ukrainian war, we're also looking at the important events unfolding in China with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO. And in this video, we're going to cover what is just happening. These tariffs, the Modi-Xi meeting, Putin's appearance, this symbolism. What does this mean for India's growth trajectory, China's slowing engine, Russia's important role or seemingly not, and why it matters? Because of how Trump's unpredictability is scrambling long-standing relations and ones that, we didn't think would ever really see an improvement, at least for a long time. And lastly, what could happen next? From cautious thaw to quick relapse, all that coming up, so stay tuned. But first, a question to you. Has Trump just handed Xi the biggest opening in Asia? Or has Modi simply reminded Washington that India will not be pushed around? Drop your thoughts below, including the embarrassing outflows this could have for Putin and Russia. Now, to start with, let's consider some crucial context and why the events happening right now are even more surprising than anyone might have expected. A few months ago, India and Pakistan sparred in the skies over Kashmir. Reports surfaced that Chinese J-10Cs and radar helped Islamabad and Pakistan. I made a few videos on those very issues, which you can find on the channel. Now, suspicions lingered. Fast forward, and Modi is landing in Tianjin, China, to shake President Xi's hand. At first, it seems like deja vu diplomacy. Another summit, another photo op. But look deeper. On paper, the readouts were bland. Manage differences, resume flights, simplify visas. But the backdrop was and is anything but bland. Looming over that handshake is Trump's tariff shock. And India has had basically two choices: bend to US demands to cut supply and demand from Russian oil, or stand firm on its autonomy. And Modi has decided to stick to autonomy. And that choice has nudged New Delhi towards much more pragmatic conversations, constructive conversations, and what seem to be heartwarming photos with Beijing. From America's perspective, and to the dislike of many Indians, India has been treated as the quote-unquote China alternative in Washington's playbook. Analysts hailed Delhi as the quote world's next workshop. It looked like India was set, something that has been known in professional circles as the China plus one approach. And then tariffs. 50% across the board. India quickly becoming the third most tariffed country in the whole of Asia. Imagine trying to run a marathon only to have your coach tie your shoelaces together at the starting line. That's basically what Delhi is dealing with. Courts may appeal, but tariffs stay. For factory towns like Moradabad, for example, where 40% of their exports go to the US, it's devastation. Others have said that this isn't supposed to happen. We were the alternative to China, not as ridiculed and demonized. If anything, India has it worse off than China, because at least China and America have reached a so-called truce over a limit of how high the tariffs go. 4 top Indian economists have called it the Trump shock, warning that it will choke exports and investment. In short, America's undercut its own strategic bet and left Delhi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi quickly recalibrating and reconsidering. Now, if looked at simplistically, Delhi's turn towards Beijing could potentially look like a betrayal of its own strategy. Here's the big point. India's growth and its drive is already built on Chinese inputs. $48 billion in electronics imported last year. APIs for pharma, rare earth magnets for EVs and wind turbines, battery know-how for clean energy. Delhi has tried to decouple, banning TikTok, blocking auto investments, tightening visas, but trying to scale without China's parts is like building a skyscraper after you've outlawed steel. Quietly, deals have been bought back. Adani cut talks, JSW Sherry Corporation, Foxconn stuck in limbo over visa delays. So that's why Modi's visit to Tianjin isn't just diplomacy, it's insurance, making sure that India's supply chains don't collapse just because Washington yanks the safety net and Trump decides to pivot once again to flip-flop and attack one of the countries most important to America's grand strategy. This is the part also where YouTube expects me to, well, encourage you to like and subscribe. So consider this your free reminder. And it is free to do. So do consider joining the community and on the lookout for future videos like this. Coming from the West and the East, I like to try and balance as much the different perspectives of how geopolitical events unfold. Now, we have talked about why India may need China, but let's flip the lens. Why China needs India? For a while now, China's growth engine has been sputtering. Real estate is fragile, debt is mounting. But next door, just a border away, sits a 1.4 billion person market. And here's the part that many people miss, including the mainstream media. And what I try to bring here is that Beijing needs Delhi just as much. 156 million smartphones sold in India in 2024. Chinese brands led the way unquestionably. 4.3 million cars sold. BYD wanting 40% of that market. Chinese firms bankroll Indian unicorn companies, Pyotr, Ola, Zomato, Beijing. And the optics? Modi and Xi, shoulder to shoulder at the SEO summit. Of course, with Putin, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran. For Beijing, this photo op is priceless. Trump punishes unnecessarily, creates more global uncertainty, makes more countries, the global south, look and think America has lost its leadership ways, while China and Asia more broadly recalibrate and restore the two biggest powers in the region to better terms, which can greater more than ever compete with the US. But despite all the reasons both sides would need each other, don't mistake this for a full-blown love story. The Gorwang clashes of 2020 still sting significantly. Borders remain unsettled. Pakistan still shops for Chinese kit. Beijing is getting more and more influential in Bangladesh. India still bans various Chinese apps, and China still controls 134 industrial categories India relies on. And of course, do not forget the Quad summit that follows at the end of this year, because if Trump shows off and launches into anti-China tirades, the Tyrannical glow could vanish overnight if Delhi feels still that its strategic interests outweigh its economic interests. And then here's a layer that the media and many will probably overlook. What does this mean for Russia? For years, Moscow has presented the Sino-Russian partnership as the counterweight to Western dominance. But the truth is simpler, because if Delhi and Beijing manage even a partial thaw, their sheer economic scale dwarfs anything Moscow can bring to the table. A combined 2.8 billion people, vast consumer markets, and complementary industries. That's a gravitational pull far stronger and organic than what Moscow likes to claim or can offer. Indeed, for Putin, it's potentially quietly quite humiliating. His great power image depends on being Xi's indispensable partner. But if India steps into that space, Russia risks being sidelined, reduced to simply a junior supplier of discounted oil and raw materials, while Beijing engages Delhi on tech, trade, manufacturing, maybe even military equipment. The symbolism of Modi and Xi shaking hands at Tianjin as Putin watches basically from the sidelines, well, it underscores that vulnerability and potential irrelevance of Moscow in even East Asia. In other words, Trump's tariffs don't just bruise India-US ties, they've opened a lane where Moscow's relevance shrinks even further, leaving Russia in danger of being outclassed in the very partnership it wants and, well, likes to continue to brag about. So why does this all matter? Because it shows how fast strategies shift when one player changes the rules. India continues to chart its own course, but Trump's tariffs are making Beijing the immediate shock absorber. And China, for all its suspicion, can't ignore India's consumer surge. Think of it as two rivals stuck in the same lifeboat. Not partners, not allies, but both pragmatic enough to avoid sinking each other and to see the bigger picture. The fact that Trump pushed them onto that lifeboat may turn out to be the most consequential blunder of his presidency so far. Then, where does it go from here? Well, we can argue potentially 4 paths. A sort of reapproachment light or partial restoration of ties, an improvement for flights, for visas, selective tech deals, borders though perhaps unresolved because they are a bigger issue between Delhi and Beijing. A transactional thaw is the second potential scenario. Beijing frees up inputs, Delhi opens limited investments, but not as far as that. A relapse, a skirmish, a Pakistani flare-up, or Trump at the Quad torpedoing progress and reminding Delhi why America is still possibly more reliable than China, or a carve-out corridor. Narrow cooperation on key industry areas in EVs, APIs, and electronics survives even if politics sour. Optics move fast, but substance takes years. And so despite the imagery and the patting on backs and happy grins, we may well still see a limited shift in China or India. But what do you think? This isn't about India being weak or China being overly confident, but about India adapting under Trump's shock therapy. Strategic autonomy means Delhi won't let itself be cornered, and Beijing President Xi sees the chance, but fears ceding a rival too much, especially one directly next door with a lot of overlapping geopolitical, strategic, and economic interests. The border shadows and unresolved territorial disputes remain and will not be resolved quickly. And the supply chains can't be rewired overnight, especially if those physical geographical borders remain disputed. If Modi can pull in China's inputs without giving away leverage, though, India holds steady. If Xi can open India's market without ceding a competitor, China buys time. If either miscalculates, the fallback, though, is familiar. Tension in the mountains. And all the while, this having a broader impact on global trade and, of course, Russia's war in Ukraine and how Putin has to consider his own options as he tries to ensure that Russia remains relevant, even when, potentially, in this part of the world, it will be even less than it was before. My name is Pyotr Kurzin. I'm from the UK and Russia, having been brought up in the West, but also educated in the East. And I try to bring a sense of balance or these different perspectives to the channel. including since my education at Johns Hopkins SAIS is in strategic studies and economic statecraft. The goal here to connect the dots without cheerleading or scapegoating, simply straightforwardly. And if you value that, you can support me by subscribing, liking this video, giving it a share to other people who will find it interesting, and perhaps becoming a member or a patron. And I'll see you all next time. Take care.